Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to continue our look at the complete history of the Pokemon trading card game, and we need to have a look at Stormfront. Stormfront has gone down as a legendary set in the Pokemon trading card game for being just this phenomenal set that introduced multiple ridiculously good Pokemon and decks and shaped the metagame for, well, the entire time it was legal. It has earned everything that is said about it in terms of positivity. This set was nuts. Although, usual thing, make sure you spam the like button on this, make sure you tell your friends. This series takes an awful lot of work, and I get a lot of good feedback. The views are kind of low right now, so let's push it, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do this. Now, Stormfront was released in Japan on July the 10th, 2008, and got an English language release on the 5th of November, 2008. Remember, that's the 5th of November. Now, it was actually the final Diamond and Pearl expansion. Now, that's not strictly true. After this, we got to Platinum. Platinum was another redonkulous set. I did tell you we were in a run of ridiculous sets. This is very much part of it, as was Platinum. But Platinum was kind of like the third game that came a while after Diamond and Pearl. So, you know, still Diamond and Pearl block, but the last one before Platinum. Now, it also brought in cards from the Giratina vs. Dialga deck kit, and it had to, that was a Japanese product, because some cards were delayed for a movie. That seems to be happening in this era of the Pokemon TCG. The most interesting thing, of course, is that Shaymin was supposed to make its debut in Stormfront, because the Japanese set that turned into Stormfront had Shaymin in. But because Pokemon wanted to wait to coincide Shaymin in the TCG with Shaymin in the film, Shaymin got dropped back to Platinum rather than coming out here. And what was kind of cool was that shiny Pokemon made their return to the Pokemon trading card game. We hadn't actually seen shiny Pokemon since EX Power Keepers. That was the final EX set. That brought us Flareon, Jolteon, and Vaporeon Star. But in this, we got new shiny Pokemon. But we're not talking about these big, limited to once during your deck, really good Pokemon Stars. We're talking about shiny Drifloon, shiny Duskull, and shiny Voltorb. Not particularly good cards. Although the Duskull did see a bit of play for what it was worth. But they were kind of mirror hollow, and they were shiny, and they were a lot of fun. Far more interesting for most collectors was, and these were again secret rares, were holo reprints of the entire Charizard line. That is to say Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard. Now, these were very heavily based on the base set cards. If we take the two Charizards side by side, we can see that you've got only minor differences there. But also the artwork had been redrawn. Same Pokemon, same pose, same artist, the legendary Mitsuhiro Arita. But what was different here was that Mr. Arita had actually redrawn the artwork, although in the same picture. And these were holos, and they were secret rares, and they were extremely cool. We also saw, well, the end of held items here. So, probably the two most relevant ones. We had Magneton holding a magnet, which reduced its retreat cost by 1 for each Magnemite on your bench. And even better than that, we had Combee, and Combee had Honey that said once during your turn, when you put Combee from your hand onto your bench, you may search your discard pile for a basic Pokemon and put it straight onto your bench. So you had a cool little thing going on there in that it was a basic Pokemon in and of itself, but it also brought in some Pokemon recovery. And I should mention while we're here, this gave us our second Mamoswine card. Yay! Mamoswine would slow down quite a lot as the years went by, but this was our second Mamoswine in quick succession, and I, for one, was delighted. Now, another thing that made their debut in Stormfront were these weird kind of item cards, where you can actually play 1 or 2 at a time and get different effects. So Pokeblower Plus, if you played 1, you flipped a coin, and if heads, you put 1 damage counter on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Did see some play in donk decks for that. But if you played 2 at the same time, you switched one of your opponent's bench Pokemon with their active, and gusting has always been huge in the Pokemon TCG. Pokedrawer Plus, if you played 1, you drew a card, but if you played 2 at the same time, you searched your deck for any 2 cards, which was preposterous, but kind of awesome. And then Pokehealer Plus, if you played 1, you removed 1 damage counter and 1 special condition, but if you played 2, you removed 8 damage counters and all special conditions. Very cool, weird cards. We've seen a few of these again over the years, but this was new and weird and fun. Now, the pre-release promo we got here was Piloswine, which makes me rather happy because, you know, that evolves into Mamoswine. And we did get some Dusknoir sleeves along with our pre-releases. And this is the part where I owe you lovely ladies and gentlemen a bit of an apology. Because I've not been telling you about the pre-release sleeves. They've been coming throughout Diamond and Pearl. I've not been mentioning them in the videos. That is rather rude of me. Let's fix that now, shall we? Now, the images do come here from sites.google.com/site/Virginia Pokemon. And back in Diamond and Pearl, we got Lucario sleeves. And these are actually legendary as being super hard wearing, which is kind of cool. In Mysterious Treasures, we got Electivire sleeves. In Secret Wonders, we got Weavile sleeves. In Great Encounters, we got Darkrai sleeves. In Majestic Dawn, we got Glaceon and Leafeon sleeves. Yeah, they were both on there. In Legends Awakened, we got Regigigas sleeves, and you'll notice at this stage, they actually stopped putting the set logo on them. That was a little bit strange. And then the Dusknoir sleeves that we got in this particular set. My apologies that I've not been keeping you up to date with those. We will do so in the future moving forward. That's my bad, unfortunately. I forgot, quite frankly, and I feel a little bit sad. The other cool thing about Stormfront was we actually got the first partner Pokemon coming through with their alternate typings. So we got our first Metal type Empoleon. We got our first Fighting type Torterra. And we got our first fighting type Infernape. We'd only seen them with their primary typings up to now. We got the secondary typings here, which was kind of fun. Now, in terms of the most expensive card, you won't be shocked to know that it's the Ultra Rare Charizard. Of course it's the Ultra Rare or the Secret Rare Charizard. You'll be looking at somewhere, $300 to $400 would be a conservative guess here. If you're looking for not one of those, you're looking for Raichu Level X, which is going to run you about $70. It is the most valuable of the Level X's, largely because it's Raichu, and people like Raichu, quite frankly. Now, speaking of the Level X's, we did get 5 of them in this particular set. Although, you had this weird thing where, we got Heatran Level X, but there was no actual Heatran in the set. Because, just the way things fell, unfortunately. That was actually pointed out by lovely folks at Bulbapedia, who I should give a shout out to, because they are a website I use when I'm researching these videos, and they are awesome. Now, Dusknoir Level X was a very cool card. We'll get there a little bit later. But it actually just had one Pokepower that turned it into a stadium when the Pokemon was knocked out, which was weird. We also got Heatran Level X, which was kind of fun. Didn't see a huge amount of play, but it was there. Machamp Level X, which did see a lot of play. We'll get there. Raichu Level X, and as a really fun little side note, Raichu Level X is one of the very few Pokemon that had a Level X and a Prime, we'll get to Primes when we get to the Heart Gold Soul Silver era, that were legal at the same time. So you could legitimately make decks where you had Raichu Prime evolving or leveling up into Raichu Level X, which was a fun little side note. Also, fully let you attack twice, which was kind of fun. And Regigigas Level X, that we'll talk about in a moment, but if you were paying attention last week, you'll know that that was a very, very good card. Now, in terms of the theme decks here, we did have 2 theme decks. And Well, let's just say they weren't created equally. We had Dark Rampage, that was a darkness fighting type theme deck. You got yourself a Holo Tyranitar, which was exclusive to the deck. It was a non-holo in the set proper. And then you got non-holo rares of Staraptor and Skuntank. But Raging Sea will go down as one of the very best theme decks we ever had. Now, what was very cool, you got yourself a holo version of Gyarados, and we're going to talk about Gyarados in a minute. Gyarados was ridiculous, and this was the only place to get the holo version of it. People bought this theme deck just to get the Gyarados, because the Gyarados was nuts. Now, you did also get yourself a non-holo Sceptile, which was exclusive. It was a holo in the set proper. And you got yourself an Abomasnow, another Pokemon that will be coming up in a few minutes' time, because Abomasnow was a really good card. Now, speaking of the best cards, there really were just a bunch of phenomenal cards in Stormfront. And I'm not talking good, I'm talking about proper job, over-the-top, silly good. Like Sableye. Now, I've actually done a video about Sableye having broken the Pokemon trading card game, and let's be clear, in a very literal sense, it broke the Pokemon trading card game. Now, Sableye had a rather nice ability, or Pokebody as it was back then, Overeager. If Sableye is your active Pokemon at the beginning of the game, you go first. Simple as that. Now, when the Black and White era started, when Black and White came out, they changed the rules such that you could do whatever you wanted going first. Back in the Diamond and Pearl era, you were not allowed to play trainer cards, so you kind of play Pokemon and attack. But what happened was that they changed the rules and Sableye became broken. Plus, it had the overconfident attack, 1 Darkness Energy, 10 damage. If the defending Pokemon had fewer HP remaining, then you did 40 damage. But there were ways to basically knock out 70 HP Pokemon doing this. It was a little bit nuts. It broke the game. There were people that would make decks built just around Sableye that would donk your opponent. I'll link a video to that in the description. It's a bit beyond the scope of what we're looking at today, but make no mistake about it, Sableye was amazing. It wasn't really overconfident, though that was a fun little donkey attack. It was the fact that you went first, and it was the attack impersonate. For 0 energy, you basically searched your deck for a supporter and used it. Search your deck for a supporter, discard it, and then use the effect of that card as the effect of this attack. It meant you could go first and then use a supporter straight away that wasn't even in your hand. It was just great. It gave a real speed boost to a bunch of the decks that we're going to be talking about. Now, for my money, Machamp may have been the most impactful card in the set. Machamp was one of those where it wasn't necessarily always ruling the format, but anytime Machamp wasn't ruling the format, it's because people were specifically teching against it. You see, Machamp had a few decent attacks, but really it was all about takeout. It did 40 damage, but it didn't really do 40 damage, because for 1 fighting energy, it got an instant KO on a basic Pokemon. Now, it's worth reminding ourselves at this stage that Rare Candy could be used to evolve from a basic to a stage 2 the turn you played the basic. You could just play the basic and Rare Candy immediately into a Machamp, which was a bit dumb. We also at the time had the card Broken Time Space, or a little bit later we would have, and Broken Time Space was a stadium card whereby you could just evolve whenever you felt like it. You could just immediately evolve any Pokemon on the field. So, yes, you got a 1-hit KO on any basic Pokemon, and that was kind of fun, but you also could get a turn 1 Machamp very easily. Machamp was ridiculous. Now, Machamp Level X was also pretty good, largely good for those Pokemon you couldn't take out with Takeout. Machamp Level X had the Pokebody No Guard, which said that you did an extra 60 damage with your attacks, and your opponent did an extra 60 damage to Machamp with their attacks, which was kind of fun. And then for free energy, you did 20 damage, but during your next turn, if Machamp would be KO'd, and bearing in mind it was really 80 damage because of No Guard, You would flip a coin, and if heads, you didn't get knocked out. You didn't always want to play Machamp because of the Pokebody. It really could hurt you as well. But when Takeout wasn't working, it was a really fun option. Now, Gengar was a very, very good card. To this day, it is the only Pokepower I've ever thought was just unfair. It had the Pokepower Fainting Spell. Now, Fainting Spell said that once during your opponent's turn, if Gengar would be KO'd by damage from an attack, you flipped a coin, and if heads, they're knocked out too. So your opponent goes through all this work to build up a Pokemon that can KO Gengar, and then if a Gengar player flips heads, they also get a KO. I hated it. I absolutely hated it. Now, one of the tricks around this was to try and KO with something like Poison. And similarly, you could get a KO with Uxie, and because Uxie went to the bottom of your deck, it meant that it wasn't there and Fainting Spell wouldn't actually work. But you had to manipulate it so Uxie was actually getting a KO, and not every deck could actually do this. I hated Gengar. Now, it also had really good attacks. For 1 Psychic Energy, put 3 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, 6 if they've got a Pokepower. And for 2 energy, you did 30 damage for each trainer, supporter, and stadium card in your opponent's hand. And we would have ways later on to lock your opponent out of item cards, so this would do a ridiculous amount of damage. It kind of needed Gengar from Arceus and Gengar Level X from Arceus to really shine, but make no mistake about it, this was a phenomenal card. Speaking of phenomenal cards, Gyarados. Gyarados was one of those cards where when it was first revealed, when it was first released, a lot of the player base didn't take it seriously. And then Worlds happened, and the French players happened. And what essentially happened was that the French players would rock up, and this made the final of seniors, and it made top 8 in Masters, and basically the French players came to Worlds and went, hey, you know that Gyarados you're all not taking seriously enough? Yeah, you totally should be. Now, the only attack that really mattered was Tail Revenge. For 0 energy, you did 30 damage for each Magikarp in your discard pile. So generally speaking here, you should be hitting 90 damage for 0 energy, though spoiler alert, the not yet released Expert Belt would come in here, and you'd actually be doing 110 damage for 0 energy. And that would be ridiculous. And your goal basically would be to try and get 3 Magikarp in the discard as fast as you can. And then when Gyarados went down, you'd recover a Magikarp using something like the aforementioned Combee, although there were plenty of item cards that could do it as well, and then use Broken Time Space to get another Gyarados, and round we went. And all of those were metagame defining cards. And to an ever so slightly lesser extent, but not much at all, so was Regigigas Level X. I mentioned Regigigas last week when we talked about Legends Awakened, but this was when Regigigas got good. Now, 150 HP for what it's worth was ridiculous. Like, Machamp also had 150, but Machamp was a level up of a Stage 2. This is a level up of a Basic. And it was just ridiculous. It had the Pokepower Sacrifice that let you choose one of your Pokemon in play, knock it out, and then search your discard pile for 2 basic energy cards and attach them to Regigigas, and remove 8 damage counters from Regigigas. So you would be healing up beautifully while accelerating energy. And why would you be accelerating energy? Because Giga Blaster. 100 damage at the time was awesome. And you discarded the top card of your opponent's deck. And you chose a random card from their hand and discarded it. Though you couldn't use Giga Blaster next turn, you'd have to use one of your previous Regigigas attacks. Frankly, ladies and gentlemen, this was redonkulous. One of my biggest regrets in the Pokemon trading card game is that I wasn't playing Regigigas Level X when I could have been. But at the time, I was playing Machamp and I was playing Donphan, and I was kind of having a jolly old time wrecking Regigigas decks. And I played a bunch in tournaments and I wrecked them every time because it was a hilarious matchup. But I regret not playing Regigigas Level X because I love Regigigas. Now, last week I told you about Magnezone Level X and I told you it wasn't ready. Well, we got 2 Magnezone in Stormfront that made Magnezone ready. Now, the better of the 2 was the lightning type one. It had the Pokepower's super connectivity. Once during your turn, you may search your discard pile for a lightning or metal energy, attach it to your active Pokemon, and put 1 damage counter on that Pokemon. Now, it's worth remembering that Magnezone Level X had that rather ridiculous attack that got automatic paralysis for 2 energy, but then you had to discard 2 energy, so you could only use Magnezone every turn if you were able to accelerate energy to it. Well, here's the energy you're accelerating to it, ladies and gentlemen. That worked rather nicely indeed. It also had the really nice attack Gyro Ball, 3 energy, 60 damage, switch to the bench. So when you took a KO, you could then retreat to the bench to protect yourself rather than leaving your level X in the active to go and be KO'd. Now, the other Magnezone wasn't quite as good, but it still made its way into Magnezone decks. It had the Pokepower Magnetic Search, which let you search your deck for a Lightning or Metal Pokemon, show it to your opponent and put it into your hand. Just gave you extra consistency, and that was lovely. Although neither of the attacks were as good as the attacks on the other Magnezone, this was generally there to help you set up and get your Pokemon out and rolling. I liked Magnezone. Now, Abomasnow was another sneaky good Pokemon here. Not the kind of Pokemon you expect to be amazing, but it really was. As long as it was your active Pokemon, any damage done to your Pokemon, all of them, by opponent's attacks were reduced by 20, so any spreading plans were put to rest. But for just 2 energy, you did 20 damage to the active, and 20 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, other than grass and water, which was very cool. It also, when it evolved, turn it evolved, 3 energy, 60 damage plus paralysis. It wasn't amazing, but it was pretty gosh darned good. To be honest with you, Abomasnow was another one of those that when Stormfront came out, it just wasn't ready. It was a very cool Pokemon, it was a very cool card, and people loved it, but it needed the Ampharos from Platinum that said that each Pokemon with any damage counter on it couldn't use Pokepowers to be really good. Also use the Ampharos from Secret Wonders that said whenever your opponent played a supporter card from his or her hand, you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon. That one we had, the one from Platinum we didn't, and the one from Platinum really was important to turn off Pokepowers, but this Abomasnow was good. Speaking of which, Dusknoir. And for the record, I am still just listing out Pokemon here that had legitimate, really good decks that saw a huge amount of play. Like Dusknoir. Now, Dusknoir had the Pokepower Shadow Command. Once during your turn, you may draw 2 cards. And then if you had 7 or more, you had to discard until you had 6. And then you put 2 damage counters on Dusknoir. Now, we liked drawing cards. And in theory, we don't like taking damage counters, except we had damage even, which let you count the number of damage counters on Dusknoir and put that many damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Didn't have to be the active. And you didn't have to use Dusknoir's ability when you were in the active. So you could sit on the bench, build up the damage with Shadow Command, get into the active, and then use damage even to take out bench Pokemon. It was kind of hilarious. It also had the really useful attack Night Spin that prevented all effective attacks, including damage, done to Dusknoir by your opponent's Pokemon with 2 or less energy attached to it, basically forcing your opponent to attack with Pokemon that had free energy. And some of them did, and the ones that did, brilliant. They could get through you. Not all of them did, ladies and gentlemen. And that would be when you would come in to shine. And while we're here, we should talk Dusknoir Level X. Dusknoir Level X is one of the weirdest Pokemon we have ever seen. You see, all it had was a single Pokepower. But if it was your active Pokemon and it basically gets knocked out by damage, and it did have to be damage, you discarded all cards attached to it, and put it into play as a stadium card. Now, this counted as being knocked out. You gave your opponent a prize card. But as long as it was in play as a stadium card, you put 1 damage counter on each of your opponent's Pokemon between turns. And then if it got removed from play as a stadium card in any way, it went back to your hand, ready to level up a new Dusknoir, and round we go. Dusknoir became a really good deck when Stormfront came out. We'll get there in a minute. Now, slightly less phenomenal, but still very, very good, was Luminion, a Pokemon that really has not seen a lot of love in the Pokemon TCG, so we've got to take what we can get. It had the Pokepower Thin Luster, and it said that if Luminion was your active Pokemon, once during a turn, and bearing in mind it had free retreat so it could get out of the active easily, you looked at your opponent's hand, and if their bench wasn't full, you chose a basic Pokemon and put it onto his or her bench, and then switched it with the defending Pokemon. And then, of course, Luminion had free retreat, so you retreated Luminion into whatever you wanted, and this would give you a huge advantage. Great for things like Machamp, grab a basic, put it down, bring it active, instant KO. It was really fun. It could clog your opponent's bench, it could bring in Pokemon that you were able to KO and you couldn't do others, it would lead to cheeky KOs. It was just fun. And then the aforementioned Combee. I've got very little to add about this, but it was just really good for recovering your basic Pokemon, and in decks like Gyarados, that was awesome. Now, moving into trainer cards here, we had Luxury Ball. And I'm not exaggerating when I say Luxury Ball was a one-of in every deck. Occasionally more generally a one-of. It let you search your deck for any Pokemon other than a Level X. And just an item card that let you search for any Pokemon. We don't see that. We just don't. There's always a massive downside. The downside here is you could not play it if there was a Luxury Ball in your discard pile. So generally speaking, everyone played exactly one Luxury Ball and loved when they drew into it. Now, Poker Draw Plus we talked about earlier. We don't need to go into too much more detail, except to say this was a phenomenal card. And this saw a huge amount of play. This gave so much consistency to speed decks. And yeah, I played for a Madon fan deck. Poker Blower Plus similarly saw a huge amount of play. It's Gusting. Gusting is awesome. Yes, obviously it can be awkward to play two at the same time, blah, blah, blah. Still totally worth it for a lot of decks. Though it is a little bit sad that Poker Healer Plus just didn't. Like Poker Blower and Poker Drawer Plus saw a huge amount of play. Poker Healer Plus, nothing like it, unfortunately. And then we did see the debut of Cyclone Energy. We also did see Warp Energy in the set, but this was a reprint, it wasn't new, so we're not going to worry too much about it. But Cyclone Energy, you attached it from your hand to your active Pokemon, and then you switched one of the defending Pokemon with one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Though it's very important to note that your opponent was able to choose the Pokemon that came active. It was basically Warp Point as an energy, which makes it confusing that this was Cyclone Energy, not Warp Energy. Strange times, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in terms of the best decks around, we've hinted at a bunch of these already. Machamp was a phenomenal deck, and it was all built around just being able to donk or just rush to quick wins by taking out basic Pokemon. It did struggle a little bit when you went up against evolved decks, but you had Luminion to help you out, and you had the Level X, which could hold its own. And between Broken Time Space and Rare Candy, you really could get this up and rolling very easily. Though, do look out for Unknown G. This was the #1 reason people played Unknown G, because it stopped takeout. It stopped effects of attacks other than damage, and an instant KO is an effect of an attack other than damage. Unknown G would be a thorn in your side. Now, Gyarados is another one we've mentioned a couple times in this video already. Sableye was huge for the deck because you needed to get set up and get those Magikarp and Sableye would allow you to go first and do exactly that. And as a fun little side story, when I played Donphan at the UK National Championships, I could not beat Gyarados. My only hope of beating Gyarados was they started lone Sableye. They went first, I went second and donked them. Sat down against a lovely chap called Alex, who would then win UK Nationals a couple years later. And Alex starts with 2 Pokemon, not a Sableye. I literally can't win the game if he draws anything. We get repaired. I still play Alex. We set up again. And I donk his lone Sableye. Not a game I deserve to win in any way, shape or form, but I would absolutely take it. Now, Gyarados was another one that used Broken Time Space. That was huge. And I've already mentioned Expert Bout. It did make you give up an extra prize, but it gave you an extra 20 damage, and it was huge because there were so many things around at the time, and we're going to get to them in a bit, but things like Regigigas Level X, 110 HP. Garchomp C Level X, 110 HP. 110 was a key number. Made you give up 2 prizes, but let you hit 110 while also giving you an extra 20 HP. It was absolutely worth it. Combee was big in the deck. That Regice we mentioned last time was pretty gosh darn big. Remember Regice, you discarded 2 cards from your hand and then made your opponent switch their active? Making them switch their active was good, but this also let you discard 2 Magikarp from your hand, which was pretty gosh darn good. As was the supporter card Felicity's Drawing. Discard up to 2 cards from your hand, discard 1 card, draw 3, discard 2 cards, draw 4. Hopefully what you're doing is discarding those Magikarp, and you're off to go. One of the cool things about this deck, of course, is that you didn't need to play energy, because the only attack you had was a 0 energy attack. So this deck would basically only play Cyclone Energy and Warp Energy to switch either you or your opponent, because you didn't actually need energy here. Now, Magnezone as a deck was very, very cool. It was built around the Level X and the attack Cyber Shock, 80 damage plus instant paralysis, and you had to discard both energy, but that's fine because one of the lightning one from Stormfront would get that energy back. Then you had the metal one from Stormfront that let you search out your Pokemon. And when you got a KO, generally you would paralyze and then you try and get a KO. And when you got a KO, it would be hopefully the one with Stormfront, the one that hit and run, so you could then get back to the bench and not be KO'd in return, which was fun. And the last deck I think we should shout out here is Dusknoir. Now, I've mentioned the Dusknoir from this set. That really was your main attacker. It was really the only one you were trying to attack with, because both Damage Even and Night Spin were great. You had the Level X with its ridiculous poker power, and you would generally play one of the Dusknoir from Diamond and Pearl, because that had the awesome poker power whereby if your opponent had 4 or more bench Pokemon, you chose one of them and made your opponent shuffle it and all cards attached to it into his or her deck. So it basically limited them to 3 bench spaces for the game, because you got to choose which one went back. That was kind of hilarious. Though do remember, Level X is counted as the same name, so you'd be looking at some awkward like 2 from Stormfront, 1 from Diamond and Pearl, and 1 Level X. That's what Jason Glasinski went for on his awesome blog, link in the description. It's a good website I use when looking for decks for these videos. And given that Jason's won Worlds 3 times, and unless you're Jason, you haven't, maybe he's the kind of person we should be listening to about this kind of stuff. Luminion was another very, very cool card here. If you could actually trap a Pokemon in the active, you could literally just sit there using Damage Even and just taking out the bench while Luminion had something rubbish stuck in the active, which was hilarious. Bearing in mind the Level X would be constantly dropping damage after you'd had a Dusknoir KO'd, so that would make Damage even better. And this was the kind of deck that also played Mewtwo Level X, because it could struggle with some of the faster basic decks. So Mewtwo Level X would basically come along and be like, don't worry, I know you don't like those basic decks, I have got your back, I will stop them. That's kind of what Mewtwo Level X did. And we love Mewtwo Level X for doing it. And there we go, a slightly longer video than usual for these history videos, but honestly, there was a lot of weird stuff going in. The stories and the little nuggets we chucked out at the beginning, there were more than usual, and this really was a very good set filled with very good Pokemon. So, it took a little while, shall we say. But now, ladies and gentlemen, it's over to you guys. Obviously, spam the like button. We've talked about that already. But tell me what you thought about Stormfront. Tell me your memories. And if you weren't playing at the time, tell me your reaction now that you have seen it. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.